Hello, welcome back to Learn Oikonomia. Today we are going to see the difference between type 1 error and the type 2 error, and also we will be seeing what is the meaning of type 1 error and what is the meaning of type 2 error. Let's get started. Moving to the very same, we could see that the type 1 error as well as type 2 error, both of these are subject to result of what is called as a null hypothesis. Okay. So when it comes to the type 1 error, we usually reject the null hypothesis even though it is true. So it shows that type 1 error here we reject the null hypothesis, though or even though it is true. Okay. Regarding the type 2 error, what happens is that the type 2 error is something that will be occurring when null hypothesis is not rejected when it is false. So we do have two types of null hypothesis, the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. So when it comes to these two, the type 1 error and type 2 error, we are basically considering the null hypothesis because considering null hypothesis automatically imply considering alternative hypothesis as well. And for the very same reason, we are not representing the case of alternative hypothesis here. We will be expressing type 1 error and type 2 error in terms of null hypothesis. So the type 1 error is something when that would be occurring when the rejection of null hypothesis would be occurring even though the null hypothesis is true. And in the case of type 2 error, you would be considering the null hypothesis, or you are not rejecting the null hypothesis, or you are doing this even though your null hypothesis is false. Okay. So let's discuss more about it. Both this type 2 error and type 1 error, we consider these as false negative. And both this type 1 error and type 2 error would be causing one or the other problems. And that is why we are trying, researchers would be trying to reduce at least one of these errors. It is not possible to eliminate both the errors simultaneously because that is always considered to be a statistical impossibility, which is not possible at all. So at least one of the errors should be reduced. Especially researchers would like to reduce the type 2 error because the type 2 error is something that is dangerous. You would be accepting a false hypothesis. Accepting a false hypothesis is more dangerous than the type 1 error. Okay, by saying that, let's consider more. Moving specifically to type 1 error, as I've told you, this would be happening when null hypothesis of a particular experiment is true, but you are rejecting it. You are not considering it. Even though it is true, you are rejecting it. And a type 1 error is something which you can call as false positive, and this would be showing an event with a given condition is present when it is actually absent. Okay, consider more about it. So here, to give you some example from a story, just consider a situation that a person might seen a bear. Okay, a person may see the bear when there is none of the bears. Actually, there is no bear, but the person may see the bear. So this will be raising something called a false alarm. So here the null hypothesis, this is something that we represent as H0. This would be containing a statement that there is no bear. Okay, so this kind of type 1 error, this kind of statement that you make, or this kind of an approach that you take, will give you something called the significance level, and this significance level is the probability of refusing your null hypothesis even though it is true. Okay, you know that this is the case, but you are refusing to accept it, you are rejecting it, you are rejecting a true case, and this is being represented by a Greek letter alpha. That is why you call it as the alpha level. And coming to the significance level or the probability of type 1 error, this is usually set as 0.05, or you call it as the 5% situation, and here we are assuming that it is satisfactory to have a 5% probability of inaccurately rejecting your null hypothesis. Okay, now having said about the case of type 1 error, we are moving on to the type 2 error, and this would be coming when your null hypothesis is actually false. This is actually false, but you mistakenly failed to refuse that situation, and that is why you consider it as false negative. Now, a type 2 error is something that is assigned when a true alternative hypothesis is not acknowledged. Rather, what you take is a false null hypothesis. You just take a false null hypothesis. Okay. So again, just to give you some example related to what we have considered earlier, here an examiner might miss discovering the bear whenever a bear is actually present. Actually, the bear is present, but he is not able, the examiner is not able to recognize the bear. Okay, so what happens here is that the null hypothesis will be a statement like there is no bear, but actually what happens is that there is a bear. Okay, and here the bear exists or does not exist within the given circumstance, but whatever you consider is that there is no bear. And the question arises here is, if it is correctly identified or not. Is it possible for you to identify the bear correctly? If it is either missing, detecting it with it is present, or identifying it when it is not present. So here the problem is that you go for accepting a false null hypothesis, which might create extra problems. Now, here the rate of the level of type of error, or the rate level of this type of error, or the type 2 error, this is represented by beta, and it is something that you can link to the power of a test that would be equal to 1 minus beta. That's all about the type 1 error and type 2 error, null hypothesis, alternative hypothesis, etc. Thank you for watching. You can like, share and subscribe this channel for more videos, and also you can be a part of our Telegram community to consider discussion, to have questions, etc. So I'll be providing the link of the same in the description box. Also, you can download Learn Oikonomia app. For that also, I'll be providing the link of the very same in the description box. That's all for today. Thank you for watching, and please like, share and subscribe this channel for more videos.